Hi, everybody, and welcome to A Mighty Blaze, a special episode of Blaze Baking with Rach. I am so happy to have author Joyce Maynard here today, who, in addition to being a writer, she's written 18 books, which I'm going to get to in a little bit. She also is a pie maker. She's made pies of all sorts, and she teaches pie classes, and we're going to get into that. If you guys are new to A Mighty Blaze, we're so happy that you're here. We are a team of 30 plus, I can't even keep track, creative volunteers helping to connect authors to readers and put books out into the world in the age of COVID and beyond. I am Rachel Levy Lesser, the host of Blaze Baking with Rach. I always say I'm the Rach in the baking show. And this show came about last January because of my love of books and baking. And we've had on all kind of authors and bakery owners. And today, as I said, we have the pleasure of having Joyce, who is an author and a pie maker. I'm going to read her very official bio, and then we are going to make the most delicious peach pie, also known as the world's sexiest peach pie, which we're going to talk about. So here we go. Joyce is a native of New Hampshire, and she began publishing her stories in magazines when she was 13 years old. She first came to national attention with the publication of her New York Times cover story, An 18-Year-Old Looks Back on Life, in 1972, when she was a freshman at Yale. Since then, she has been a reporter and columnist for the New York Times, a syndicated newspaper columnist whose domestic affairs column appeared in over 50 papers nationwide, a regular contributor to NPR and national magazines, including Vogue, the New York Times Magazine, and many more. She's a longtime performer with The Moth. I love The Moth, I must say. Joyce is the author of 18 books, including the New York Times bestselling novel, Labor Day. The pie is in that book. And To Die For, both adapted for film, Under the Influence, and the memoirs, At Home in the World and The Best of Us. Her latest novel, which I'm holding up, Count the Ways, which I devoured, and I've told Joyce many times, I cannot stop thinking about it. I miss her characters, and I wonder how they're doing right now. Which is Count the Ways is the story of a marriage and a divorce and the children who survived it. This was published by William Morrow last month. She is currently at work on a book about her return to Yale University 2.5 years ago as an undergraduate, 48 years after dropping out at 18. Maynard is a fellow of the MacDowell Colony and Yaddo. She is the founder of Right by the Lake, a week-long workshop on the art and craft of memoir held every year since 2001 at Lake, I hope I'm saying this right, at Lake Atitlan, Guatemala. Was that right, Joyce? Yeah.
Yeah. Got it.
Welcome, Joyce.
Oh, it's so good to be with you.
We're so happy you're here.
With everybody who's tuned in, this is one of my favorite things to do, pass on pie. I'm all set up, but I was wondering if you'd like to first hear a little bit about why I do this.
I would love to. And as I told you before we got on air, I read your beautiful Facebook post, and I actually said to my husband last night, you have to hear this. You have to hear her history of pie. And I read him the whole post. So please share it with our audience, because I love the stories behind the stories, and I connect to it in a lot of ways. So definitely please share it with us.
So pie kind of begins with my mother, who really did make the best pie ever. And we should just clarify that whenever we're talking about good pie, we're really talking about the crust. The filling is not a great mystery, but many people are kind of intimidated by crust. And if you're one of those people, you've come to the right place. I'm going to assure you of that. So my mom made great pie, and she never really taught me how to make pie. I didn't think I would ever have to learn, because I expected my mother to live forever. She was that kind of a mom. But when my mother was 67 years old, exactly the age I am now, she was diagnosed with an inoperable brain tumor. I was 35 at the time, raising 3 young children in my marriage and living in New Hampshire. And I dropped my life, left home to be with her for the last summer of her life. And she was a very frank woman. She was very open about the fact that she was dying. And she said she wanted to say goodbye to her friends. So she was an incredible hostess. So almost every night we had a dinner party, and I made pie. I discovered that I did know how to make her pie, that she'd never taught me, but I had just watched it so many times. And her friends would take me aside and they would say, we're going to miss your mom. And then they'd say, we're going to miss her pie. Could you give us the recipe? So, Rach, I'm sure you know as a baker that good pie crust is not about the recipe. The recipe is almost always pretty much the same. It's how you handle the dough. So, the beginning.
I learned that on an episode of the show in March where I was mishandling the dough, which we talked about with Beth Howard, who's watching today, I believe.
Beth and I have never met, but we have corresponded about pie for a long time.
Of course. Yeah.
And I look forward to the day when we do have our pie.
And I should say, Joyce, and the audience knows this who watch me regularly. My mom passed away from cancer when she was 57. I was 30. And so I can relate to a lot of what you're saying. My mom was not a cook or a baker, but she had a lot of she was an amazing hostess, actually. And so I can so relate to what you're saying.
It is where I go to connect with my mother and to connect with myself. So I started teaching my mother's friends how to make pie. And it was a very comforting thing to do, to roll out that dough and pass her along and in some ways keep her alive. And after her death, I was back home in New Hampshire. That happened also to be the fall that my marriage ended. So it was a pretty devastating time in my life. And I found that one of the most comforting things I could do was make pie, but I didn't really want to eat all that pie. So I started teaching other people how to make pie. And I began a tradition at my house in New Hampshire first of every Thanksgiving inviting, first it was my friends, and then it was people I didn't even know, to come over to my kitchen in groups of 20, sometimes 25, and I would help them make their Thanksgiving pie. And then we made so many pies, we were giving them to the soup kitchen in town, and the local orchard was donating apples. And when I moved from New Hampshire to California, I didn't want to give up the pie connection, but I didn't really know anybody in California. So I had to kind of put it out on the internet that I was teaching pie. And I do it for love, not for money. But I raise money for candidates that I believe in. I think at this point, I'm going to get my peaches.
Yeah, let's do that. I have my peaches here too. I think you said on your post you raised something for $10,000 pie.
I'm going to be peeling some peaches.
Okay, I cheated a little bit. I already cut my peaches up.
And you know, some people would bake even with the peels. These are really fabulous local New Hampshire peaches.
And peaches are in season right now. In fact, I got an email this morning. I thought it was.
I'll just mention, as I peel these, some of them are super ripe and some of them are rather hard and firm. This is great because one of the things that I really believe in with pie filling is that it should have some texture and variety. You do not want a filling that is mush. You want. There's so many metaphors about pie.
Yeah, and this is a very meaty pie filling to say, you know, with the peaches. And I know you also said too, we're making peach pie today, but you can certainly do any other kind of filling as well.
If somebody out there has a bunch of blueberries or apples, if you do have them, I would say be aware. We haven't gotten to cutting them up yet, but sometimes people cut their pieces up too small, and that's when you get, you know, those kind of applesauce-like pies or peach. You don't want that, but neither do you want these giant chunks that won't cook through.
Right.
So for this, I've just gotten to a firm peach, and I had two very soft peaches. That is great news.
And I know I was watching one of your other videos before for research for this, and you're using a knife. You kind of like them to be misshapen and not all.
Well, I do use a knife. I have to say I'm really comfortable with this. There are people who would. I don't think a paring knife would work very well for peaches, but certainly for apples, I use a knife for everything. But if you're more comfortable using a paring knife, go for it.
Right. I use a knife as well, I will say.
And I would never just toss out these peelings. I'm sure there would be all kinds of good things you could do. I just keep them in a bowl and munch on them at different times. But I'm really liking the looks of these peaches. As you may know, I'm probably, people always say, what's your favorite pie? And I say, my favorite is whatever fruit is in season at the moment. I like to use fresh fruit. And in the winter, when there aren't particularly fresh fruits, that's when I'll probably default to Granny Smith apples for a good tart, firm apple pie. But
when I was with Beth, we made chess pie in the winter, which is kind of like a vanilla custard pie. It didn't even involve the fruit.
Okay. Totally.
And that was, nothing was particularly in season.
I don't yield my crown for too much, but I will say custard pie, cream pies, meringue pies, I'll make them, but I'm really all about a classic.
You're more of a fruit. I also made a strawberry rhubarb pie in June when the strawberries were really, really ripe, which was nice. Yeah.
That's the time for it. So right now, peaches are great. As I think you mentioned, I a few years ago, I published a novel called Labor Day.
Yes.
That was about, it's the story of a love affair between a very lonely, troubled, single mother who's kind of almost agoraphobic, who takes her son, her 13-year-old son. She's living alone in a small New Hampshire town. She was so not me, but I know about being a single mom in a small New Hampshire town.
Yeah.
And she took her son back to school shopping just before Labor Day weekend, and a man comes up to her in the store, and he's got a little blood dripping down his head. He's wearing a baseball cap, and he says, "Could you take me home with you?" Now, I understand this is a little bit of a hard sell, that a woman would actually do such a thing. As I'm going to do the Julia Child thing, which is to just toss. Here
I love it. Julia Maynard.
Yeah. So here we go. There go my crusts.
Yes.
Okay, I'm thinking about crust. So anyway, she takes the single mom takes the man home, and it turns out he's an escaped convict on the run. And there's a manhunt for him all over New England over the course of this Labor Day weekend. And they fall in love. You'll understand.
Beautiful book and a beautiful movie too. Do you want to tell them who's in the movie? The moment that we really sort of know that this man is not a bad man after all is when he teaches her 13-year-old son how to make a pie. And a neighbor has just come by. Of course, they've had to hide the man, but a neighbor has just come by with a big bucket of very ripe peaches. So when you have a big bucket of ripe peaches, there's only one thing to do, and she does it. She makes a pie, or he makes a pie, and he teaches her son how to make a pie. And when Jason Reitman, the director, approached me about making the film, I said there was one condition, that I didn't want the pie in that movie to look like some perfect, no offense to Martha Stewart here, who I admire in all kinds of ways, but I didn't want a Martha Stewart pie. I wanted a pie that looked imperfect, and a pie that would look like something that a convict on the run would make, which is actually kind of what my pies look like. You know what? That's what my pie kind of looked like too when I made it.
I believe in that. You want to know that it was made by a human being.
So it's a sexy pie and also a pie made by a convict on the run, both at once.
So in the movie, so I said to Jason, you can make this movie, but I want to supervise the pie. So I was flown to the set of the movie. It was shot in Massachusetts, should have been New Hampshire, and I had the onerous task of teaching Josh Brolin.
Tough job.
Pie. And actually Kate Winslet sort of supervised this as well. I don't think she had to actually make the pie, but she was rather happy to watch. And he turned out.
I love that. And you sent us pictures, which I posted on a Mighty Blaze Facebook. You guys
he was a natural. And the pie that he made, there was a scene, they actually built a special oven for the baking scene, so you could sort of see the pie cooking in the oven. Yeah. But it is, I believe, the sexiest pie scene ever.
Well, I read the book and I also watched the movie. And by the way, for those of you who have the book at home, on page 64, I believe it is, the recipe is in the book as told through the character Frank, how he explains to the Kate Winslet character how to make the pie. So it's really beautifully done. Yeah.
Frank is channeling me. Everything that he says about making that pie.
Right, and we're going to talk about this because I think he talks about the pastry blender, which I have. Joyce introduced me to a pastry blender. This is brand new. I think the one that you use is your grandmother's?
Well, I have various ones. I'm always getting new ones. This one I just got. This is a pastry blender is not to be confused with the appliance that you plug in.
Which I used it with.
And you'll never get a flaky pie when you use a Cuisinart or you use a blender. You'll get a different kind of a thing that could be very interesting and buttery, but it won't have the crust.
This is a great purchase for you guys at home, and you can get it at the grocery store, online, wherever.
You can order it online and
okay, so we have our peaches in the bowl.
I think I'm going to make just cut up a few more peaches.
Okay.
Incidentally, this is my second pie of the day. I made a pie this morning that was a combination. I had some blueberries, but not enough for a whole pie.
Nice.
You sliced in some other fruit. So the pie that I made this morning was a combination of blueberry, peach, a little bit of pear, and I also put some crystallized ginger in that one.
Oh,
but this
that sounds amazing.
one is going to be a classic peach
pie. So after we have the peaches, we're going to add the sugar, right?
We are. And, you know, I have to give a little bit of a disclaimer here. There are people who are really very comforted by numbers and quantities. And I am not one of those people. And I actually one of the things that I try to do when I'm teaching pie is help people get in touch with their instincts and be less hung up on the numbers. So when I add my sugar, don't freak out if you need numbers.
I know what you're going to do because I've seen your videos. And by the way, at A Mighty Blaze, we're not into numbers either. We're creative readers and writers.
I sprinkle some sugar on, and I've got to tell you, not a huge amount of sugar.
Well, I'm adding my sugar. So, and mine has been pre-measured, but not exactly.
I don't know, maybe a third of a cup, maybe a little bit more. There is a problem. Sugar makes the pie less runny, and you don't want a watery pie. Some people solve that watery problem by using an ingredient that I hate to mention, which is cornstarch. I'm sure it does not appear in your pantry, but
we're not going to talk about that.
No, we're not.
We're going to mention that word.
Glutinous pies that you sometimes get at a not good diner, cornstarch.
Right.
Instead, this is my secret recipe ingredient, which is
tapioca. Are we adding a little lemon juice too?
You could add lemon juice. In fact, I happen to have.
Because I have a little lemon juice and cinnamon too that I'm going to add.
Yeah, you know, I actually hadn't thought about putting lemon juice in because I do it mostly for my apple pie, but I'm going to just a little bit of lemon. Never a bad idea.
Okay, when I did it, I did a little lemon juice and cinnamon. And I know there probably are people at home who are getting a little nervous because we're not using measuring cups, but that's how we roll here today.
Okay, so here's my filling now. I'm going to set it aside.
Did you put the tapioca in?
The tapioca is in.
And that's a little secret of yours, right?
It's not the big pearls. It's the minute tapioca.
Yeah, the minute. I have the minute.
Yeah, or you could even sprinkle tapioca flour. And it'll be, see it or taste it, it'll just be soaking up those juices. Okay, now we come to the part that some people are scared of, but I know you won't be. That's the crust. And I will mention that we have a small challenge here today, which is, I don't like where you are, but it's a really hot day here. And pie should ideally be made at a time when it's not super hot because you want your butter to be cold. And that's one reason why we're going to work kind of fast, because I don't want my butter to warm up.
So did you just take your butter out of the fridge?
I have my butter sitting on a couple of little ice packs.
Okay, I took my butter out right before, so mine's ready to go.
But you definitely don't want your butter at room temperature.
Right, so mine's nice and cold.
Here, I'm going to put 3 cups of flour in.
I already did that, 3 cups of flour, and some salt as well.
I am going to catch up with you in the salt.
Okay.
Here we go. And I'm pretty, this is not, we're not talking about a souffle here. We're not talking about a, bechamel sauce. This is a very forgiving kind of a thing, pie crust.
Yeah.
So I take if you wanted to know how much salt, probably about 3/4 of a teaspoon.
That's what I did. I already did it, 3/4 of a teaspoon.
I take my fork. Some people sift, but I used to sift. I don't know why, because we're not trying to make it light and fluffy. So I just fork. Now comes the moment when, you know what I didn't do? I didn't put out my pie plate. So hold steady. This is a moment to just meditate.
Okay.
I'm going to get my dish.
I have my pie plate here. So my pie plate is ready to go. I'm going to move Joyce's beautiful book out of the way so we don't get them messy.
You will notice this is not some fancy schmancy pie plate. It's also not one of those disposable aluminum, which really is not a good idea. I give away a lot of pies, but it's no problem giving them away because I go to the Goodwill all the time and get new pie dishes. So here's my pie dish, and I'll just set it aside. So we'll read it in a second. Okay. Here comes the big controversy about pie.
Yes.
If you want the best flavor, it comes from butter. If you want the best flakiness, it comes from shortening, Crisco, or if you're hardcore, lard. I have vegetarian children.
This is Crisco in here. I already took it out.
So how do you
a little bit of both, right?
You use both.
Okay.
More butter than Crisco. And I'll tell you,
1 stick of chilled butter that we're putting in.
A little bit more than that. Probably about a stick and a bit.
A stick and a bit. Very technical.
During the first 6 months of the pandemic, Rachel, I was in Guatemala, where I had been teaching a memoir workshop, a writing workshop that I would tell anybody listening who's ever wanted to tell their story. And after the workshop, the airport closed down, and I wasn't really stuck in Guatemala. I just wanted to stay in Guatemala. And I invited a couple of my workshop students, one of whom is now my camera woman here today, to stay on with me. And we ended up staying together for 6 months, and I taught them pie. And here comes the butter. I'm flinging in cut up into smaller pieces.
You were in Guatemala for the first 6 months of the pandemic.
We were, and I taught them pie, but there was no Crisco. So during all those months, I made strictly with butter, and I have to tell you, those pies were pretty darn great. And I sort of questioned whether I even needed Crisco. But today I decided my pie this morning would go back to Crisco, and I have to tell you, it was flakier.
Well, I have to say, I've made your pie crust a few times now with the combination of the butter and the Crisco, and it is so flaky, and it always turns out great. So
this is the moment when you have got to work fast, because you're going to melt. You don't handle it. You don't stand there sort of saying, how many pieces shall I cut that into? You just slice it up into a bunch. Here's my Crisco. It's a dollop, and maybe it's a dollop and a little bit. And now I take my pastry blender, and I'm going to show you what this looks like. If anybody's ever made biscuits, it's similar motion. It's called cutting. And what it is, just making sure that every little grain of flour attaches itself to a bit of butter or shortening. It doesn't have to be perfectly integrated. You want a few little pebbles of that butter. Can you see this?
This is a great tool, Joyce.
It is a great tool. And you can see, if you did this in a Cuisinart, it would make everything completely uniform. That's not what you do not want a big chunk like this. You just want little pebbles.
Okay. So you don't use your fingers at all. You just use the pie blender.
Just, oh, never the fingers, because the fingers are hot. Your
Right.
fingers are warm. You want to handle the dough as little as possible. And I have seen people, in the 25 years that I've been teaching pie, actually it's closer to 30, I've seen people who come to my workshop and they put their hands in that bowl, and that's how their mother taught them, and I would never want them to change their way. But for me, for a really flaky pie, I would not think of touching this.
Yeah, I'm laughing to myself because Beth Howard knows I got in trouble. She got me in trouble for handling the pie dough.
Completely on the same page on this. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, and I'm looking at this, and this is the reason why I don't do exact measurements, Rach, because every day is a little different. I'm looking at this one, I'm thinking, I think I need another handful of flour. Okay. There's more moisture in the day, probably.
That happens with my cookies too. I have that same thing.
Yeah. So, okay, here we go. Now comes the water. Adding the water.
The water. Ice water.
Here's a truth about water and pie crust.
Okay.
You can always add more water. You can never take it away. So begin with a very little bit of water, as little as you can get away with.
Okay.
And I don't want enough water for 2 crusts because I don't want that water to sit on this too long. So I make a little well in the center, and I pour just enough to dampen it. I take a fork and I whisk it around. I whirl it around like this. You see, on the edges, it's dry, but in the middle, it's wet. Then I take wax paper.
Yeah.
Area.
A little more water in.
My mother, she never did this. I don't know, did Beth use wax paper?
With Beth, we didn't use wax paper. We used, no, I think we just did it on a surface with flour.
So I find wax paper makes it a whole lot easier to use dough if you've got a very crumbly dough.
It does, and also it helps in the end, well, not in the end, but the next step when you actually put it on, when you put it in the dish.
Now, if you forgive me, I'm not going to have lots of chats right now because we've got to move.
Well, this is baking with Rach, not chatting, so that's good.
Exactly. So
Okay.
right here, I'm rolling.
It
does not look. It's going to hold together. And if I had to lift this up, I'd be in trouble. But I don't have to lift it up because it's on my wax paper.
But you put it in 2 discs, right? Did you talk about that?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Did you divide it up into 2 discs, or are you doing it all together?
No, this is the first bit. That's why I just put the water in the center well.
The first bit, got it.
On top. I don't know if my camera woman can come in close.
And I'm putting some flour on my rolling pin too.
And you'll see. Now it is very hot today. This is the most challenging day. But am I scared? No, I am not.
Okay. I'm not scared if you're not scared.
Okay. Here's my dish. Put it on top of my crust and flip. Press it down. And I hope it peels back, but it's actually so hot that it's not peeling well. And there's a solution. Oh, maybe I can do it. If it doesn't peel well, stick it in the fridge for a minute. But I think I can do with it.
Yeah, it is warm.
I'm going to create a problem on purpose so I can solve it for you.
I like it.
Okay.
All right, mine's okay. I'm gonna flip it.
Mine looks like a mess. Oh no, is my pie wrecked? What do you think? Absolutely. I patch.
You patch. You never worry here.
There's a tool that is built into your body, which is the heel of your hand. I patch this.
Yeah, that's a good tool. Hang on, I'm about to flip.
And I'm going to press in enough dough to go out to the edges and a little beyond.
Yeah, I have to operate on mine a little bit here too.
In general, so I'm actually going to, I may for the top crust, because the top crust, as you'll see, is a little more challenging. And I may need to refrigerate my dough for just a minute, which will give us a chance to talk about a few things while it's refrigerated.
That's fine. And the top crust is slightly bigger, right?
It is slightly bigger. We'll get to that in just a minute. Okay, here's my bottom crust. I go back to my trusty minute tapioca, and I sprinkle
Put that in.
just on the bottom. And when people say how much, I say this will mean nothing to you if you live in Florida or Arizona. Just the way it's like salt on an icy road in New England in winter. That's what it looks like.
Right.
My peaches. I do not want a paltry, stingy pie. I want a nice, high mound of peaches.
It looks so pretty. I'm about to put mine in too. And that gave the pie enough time to sit with the tapioca, or the peaches rather.
They will, and they'll sit with it as they cook too, of course. And then I want to have little tiny pellets of butter all across this. As far as I'm concerned, there's no such thing as too much butter. So I put a little bit all around here. Oh, I see a lemon seed in this. Is that a problem? No.
No.
Okay.
All right, let's show everyone. This looks pretty good, right?
I'm putting this over to the side.
Okay.
A window, so I'm going to put it here. Now we're going to make our top crust.
Okay, I'm getting out another piece of wax paper here. By the way, I'm on my porch. I'm not even in my kitchen because my kitchen's under construction.
That's a challenge.
Yeah.
I have made it in many a difficult place, however, it's possible.
I'm going to bring this over to my neighbor's oven afterwards, and they get to keep the pie because I already made one yesterday.
Okay. Here we go.
We have our
Pour
second pound.
water.
Oh, I already did water. Yeah. Okay.
And I am going to, I can tell that this butter is too warm in this, and that what it needs to do is sit in my fridge for about 5 minutes, which will give us a minute to just contemplate what we've done so far and maybe answer questions from people who've gone this far, and then we'll take this out and we'll
Yeah.
do the
Now, Julia, who's our producer, working behind the scenes. Julia, if you have any questions you want to pop up, feel free. But before you do that, I will say that we are giving away a copy of Joyce's new book, Count the Ways. So in order to be eligible to win a copy of the book, please comment or ask a question in the chat, and we will pick a winner as we get towards the end. So if anybody has
I'll tell you, I wanted to tell you, Rachel, there's I mentioned, I think, that Jiren, who's operating the camera, this is not her first rodeo. This is not her first pie rodeo. Last fall, like a lot of people, I was pretty concerned about the election, and I had always hosted a pie party to raise money for my candidate, but that year I couldn't. We know why. So I decided to do a virtual pie party in this location. And Jiren and Jenny, another young friend, came to help me film it and field the questions. And I charged everybody $100 to give to the Democratic Senate campaigns. We had 50 women and a few men baking simultaneously, and they were all holding up their bowl in front of the camera. The gallery showed 50 pies in the works, and everybody's calling out, more water, more shortening.
Right. Oh, wait, you know what? I think we lost Joyce's sound for a minute. I don't know if yeah. Let me see if I can get this back. Hang on 1 second, guys. I think we're back, Joyce. We're good.
Okay, good. Anyway,
yeah.
I think for anybody who wants to see that pretty wacky pie class that did yield 50 beautiful pies, it's going to be on my Facebook page tomorrow.
That's great. Yeah, and I watched some of your videos before of how you made the pie. You were on an evening news segment, and you basically put together an apple pie in about 2.5 minutes.
I got it down. I was on. It was a tour for Labor Day. I called it Kate Winslet was unavailable tour. So I'm ready to answer your questions.
Any questions you'd want to? Any questions, Julia, that we have to post up on the screen from our viewers? Feel free to put them up. Here we have.
While you're thinking of your questions, I'll mention that I've written 10 novels now. Count the Ways is my 10th. There it is. I think it's my best novel, actually, although
I adored it.
I don't really pick favorites, but it's my most ambitious novel. It tells the story of a family over 40 years. And there are certain motifs that come back again and again in my work. And one of them is ice skating. And one of them is Dolly Parton, who I like a lot, and who speaks to me in all kinds of ways. And one is pie. So there is a scene, as you remember, Rach, in the book, where the main character, Eleanor, who's recently divorced, and sharing custody of her 3 young children with her children's father, is alone on a Christmas day. As happens to divorced parents. It used to be part of my story when I was raising my 3 children as a single mom. And she makes the choice to go on a blind date on Christmas Day with a single dad of 2 young sons. And she brings a pie, which for those boys is as exotic as if she were bringing a Fabergé egg. Well, they probably wouldn't know
that. I remember that scene. I'll call it a scene because it was a chapter. The book is made of many short chapters, which I loved. And I remember when you were talking to Jenna, when she interviewed you on Friday Frontliners, she said something which I felt, which is that chapter in itself could have been a standalone short story. It was.
It's the one that I often read because it is both poignant and funny.
It is. Yes.
I think many of us who have been.
It's funny and it's heartbreaking.
I was myself a single parent who still held out for love. And part of this book is about the woman having her own dreams and trying to carry on with her life as she's also trying to be a mother to these 3 children and all the other things that women have to be, including maybe I'm not much of a housekeeper, as you can see.
No, I'm not either. Well, I will say Count the Ways. It's a beautiful family saga that takes place over a generation, I'll say. I mean,
it goes from the 70s to the early 2000s, which were pretty much my years of raising my 3 children.
Yeah, so we see this family grow up and change and happy times and sad times. And we also see it's sort of marked through different times in our history. The Challenger explosion was a big part of it, which I certainly remember where I was when that happened. You start back in the 70s with Watergate. It's very interesting the way you tie that in, I think, and everybody can relate to their own personal experience where they were when they were.
It's got a lot of music in it, which my books always do.
Yeah, a lot of music.
That is bringing me, I'm going to stop chatting now because
Okay.
keep this crust cold. This is the moment that I always say, I don't care if the phone rings. I don't care if it's George Clooney on the other line. You can substitute who your person would be. You do not pick it up because, oh yes, look at this. This is looking really good. And I see a lot of future flakiness in this.
As Frank says in Labor Day through you, we're going to put the roof on it, right?
We're going to put the roof on this house, yes.
Okay.
So
I'm ready. And my hands are not shaky like Kate Winslet.
okay. Now, obviously, we can't put this one in the way we did the other, which was to flip the pan upside down. So we have to have a certain amount of faith in ourselves.
Okay, I'm a little nervous right now, I gotta say, because I'm about to flip this.
Okay, here we go.
Ready?
1, 2, 3. There.
I'm doing it.
Put my hand.
I did it.
Oh, but did you get yours?
I did it.
I go
Oh,
around the
amazing.
edges so that the top crust adheres with the bottom.
It definitely looks like a convict made mine, which is good, right?
I absolutely. Look at this. It's coming out great. Chilling it really big difference.
This looks amazing. And now we're gonna pinch the ends, right?
We're going to do a little pinching, which if there's a child around, this is often the job I give to that child.
Yes.
And because there's no way you can really pinch wrong unless you're pinching a person who doesn't want to be pinched. So I go around here and I always leave a little extra, Rach, so that when it comes out of the oven, you have a little piece that you can break off and munch on.
That's the best.
And it's also, again, for that child who did the pinching, it's kind of nice to be able to give them a little bit. Now I take my trusty pastry brush and a little cup of milk and I brush. It could also be a little.
Do an egg on top too?
Egg is another option. What you're
Okay, I'm doing an egg. My friend actually dropped off eggs from her eggs in her yard from her chicken, so I'm using that. Thank you, Lisa, for this.
And then I have, you don't need this, but this is Turbinado sugar.
Oh, okay.
This is that sort of more heavy crystal, less fine sugar that I sprinkle on top. If there's somebody special that you were making this pie for, we won't do this today because it's such a hot day. I could roll out a little piece of crushed dough, cut it in the shape of a heart or a letter or whatever, and put it on top, and it would stick with milk.
I'm just gonna put regular sugar.
With my fork.
Yes.
And here is my pie. Here's my peach pie. Is going to go into the oven. But meanwhile, I want to show you the one I made. Here's this one's blueberry. This one's blueberry, peach, pear, cherry. And here's
show and tell. This is my peach pie that I made yesterday. Oh, so good.
People ask, how long do you bake it? And I say, bake it until it smells like pie. And you want to get a nice brown crust going, not burnt, obviously, but you want it to have a nice little suntan.
And it's nice and heavy and hearty, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
And you made it at 400 degrees?
425.
425. Okay.
425 for me. I like it a little bit high in the oven so it'll get that browning effect. You do not want a pale pie. And if you're going to be heating it up later, you could even undercook it knowing you're going to bake it some more later. if you don't intend to eat it today, you can freeze the pie that we made today. I could stick it in the freezer just like this and take it straight out of the freezer and put it into the oven on a day that I wanted pie.
Okay. All right.
And incidentally, there's absolutely no rule that you couldn't have this for breakfast either.
Of course not. I mean, it's fruit and dough. What's the difference between that and a pastry? Nothing.
I will just say, I want to say, one of the reasons why I do this isn't just my brand gimmick. I feel never more than now do we need to be reminded of things that have nothing to do with technology, that do not require us to plug in any device, that cannot be made in mass quantities, that require a human being connecting with herself and her hands and her thoughts and ultimately the people that she gives it to. It's when there's a person that I love, person that I want to send a message to, that I care about them, I'm likely to make a pie.
That's so beautiful. And that's so well said. And I will say this whole show started out of sort of organically, because when the pandemic started, before I was even working with the Mighty Blaze, I was teaching my kids' friends how to bake different things on Zoom because everybody was quarantining at home. And it just became about everyone working with their hands, working together, parents and kids. And then it turned into this. So I think we need that now more than ever.
I think, I started writing Count the Ways before the pandemic, but the last draft of it was written during the pandemic. And in many ways, it was a celebration about home. The things that you can do when the whole world stops. And that's how it was for many of us. And I don't pretend that I know what it was like to try to be educating young kids while carrying on a job, or the many hardships that people endured, let alone the illness and loss of loved ones. But there was a gift in the pandemic too, and it was getting to reconnect with simple pleasures and things that brought you close to the people that you most wanted to be close to.
I agree. The baking has been a huge part of it. And also I have to say too, after reading about why you started making pies, your mother's pies, I feel like a little bit of your mom is living on through this pie and through what you've taught us today, and all the people that are watching out there. And I mean, that's how people that we love live on. And I feel very connected to you and to your mom, and I hope everybody watching does too.
So if you need a refresher, by all means, pick up a copy of Labor Day. If you just need a really good book, you can also pick up a copy of Labor Day. But I'm going to urge you to pick up Count the Ways. And you'll find a family that does lots of things at home.
Yeah. And it will actually, one of the questions that did pop up was, Joyce, where are you baking from today? Can you tell everybody?
Right now, I'm at my little summer cottage in New Hampshire.
Okay.
I can be here in the warmer months because there's no central heat in this house. Today there was a lot of heat in this house.
Right. We're at a heat wave.
This is where I come every May and stay as long as I can stand it, and then I'm going back to college in the fall. So I'll lock the doors and drain the pipes and.
Right. So you're going back to Yale.
Be back to make more pies here.
Yeah. It's funny when you said your cottage in New Hampshire, I'm imagining, and I know your book was a novel, but that is fiction, that I'm imagining Eleanor's kitchen in the farm.
They are not dissimilar. I raised my 3 children on a farm in New Hampshire that was a lot like this in many ways. And the book was really a celebration and an honoring of a time in my life that is gone. Some parts of it were very hard, and the book is full of sorrows and losses too. But it is very much a story of centered in home.
I would agree with that. And it is interesting that you said that you started writing before the pandemic, because so many of us all over found ourselves connected in our homes to our families in a way that we never had before.
Of course, there were people who had the opposite experience. They couldn't see their family for a very long time.
Yeah.
One thing you cannot do is send a pie through the mail, incidentally.
Yeah.
Luckily, I have another recipe for that. Something that can be sent through the mail, and maybe we'll do that another day.
Yeah. Speaking of Count the Ways, Joyce and her publisher were very generous to do a giveaway of Count the Ways. So Julia, can we pull up a winner from somebody who's commented or made a question? And then we will make sure to get that book out. To you. Here it is again, Count the Ways. I'm just gonna grab it.
Oh, let's hear who it is and what state they live in. I like to be.
Yeah. Can you tell us, Julia? I don't know if you'll be able to tell you what state we're in. Here, she's just pulling it up. Give me one sec. Yeah, we'll definitely get that out. You can also, Joyce, you recorded the audiobook to Count the Ways.
I did. I happen to love the audiobook, and if you haven't bought the book yet, but you're thinking of it, there's no bad way to hear this story, in my opinion. But I loved reading this book out loud.
Yeah. Do you? I'm just curious. Did you record a lot of your books on audio?
I have the last 4 or 5 books I've recorded. One of them, Labor Day, I couldn't record because it's in a male voice, but my son Will, actor, recorded that one. So it's been a family endeavor for a while now. Yeah.
That's so cool. Your son did it?
My son did. Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
My son, also known as Wade Kinsella on Heart of Dixie, the guy.
Oh, okay. Very cool. Oh, we have a winner. Cindy Dowling is the winner of Count the Ways. Cindy. Okay, so Cindy, what you should do is you can message A Mighty Blaze on Facebook or Instagram with your address, or you can email amightyblaze@gmail.com.
And Cindy, if you include your address when you contact Mighty Blaze, I will make sure you get a book plate with your name on it.
Oh, that's so nice. Thank you, Joyce. That's wonderful. So I just want to thank you so much, Joyce, for being here. This has been such a pleasure. And I'm going to make your pie crust with all different kinds of fillings over the years and think of you often. And I just so appreciate it.
How it multiplies.
Yeah. And I wanted to give a little promotional plug for our next baking show. It's in 2 weeks on Saturday, August 28th. We're going to be making a recipe from a brand new book called Baked to Perfection by Kat. Her name is Katarina Sturmeld. She's a British baker, and this is all 100% gluten-free recipes.
Whoa.
Kat actually started a gluten-free diet. Then she got her PhD in chemistry at Oxford to sort of learn the science behind gluten-free. And we're going to make a gluten-free lemon drizzle cake, which I've made. I didn't tell my family that it was gluten-free, and they didn't know it, and it was amazing. And so,
that was a very wise decision. The minute I hear free, I kind of think, oh no.
I just
maybe I'll tune in.
Whatever I bake, they eat. So thank you so much, Joyce. Thank you everybody for watching. I'm gonna
thank you all for tuning in.
Great. We will see you next time, and thank you, Joyce.